The fluorescent lights of Metropolitan Hospital's East Wing buzzed faintly overhead as Sophia moved with practiced efficiency between patient rooms. Her white uniform contrasted beautifully against her smooth, copper-brown skin. Her braids pulled back into an immaculate bun that had yet to loosen, despite 12 hours into her shift. At 28, Sophia carried herself with a quiet dignity that commanded respect, without demanding it, a trait inherited from her mother, Clara. Miss Jackson in 422 needs her antibiotics in 30 minutes, she reminded the younger nurse trailing behind her. And Mr. Watson's daughter will be arriving at 7 to discuss his discharge plan. Have his paperwork ready. Yes, Nurse Bennett, the new hire replied. Scribbling notes frantically, Sophia glanced at her watch. 6:07 a.m. The night shift was nearly complete, and fatigue pulled at her limbs. Yet her posture remained impeccable. Her voice steady. She'd learned early that excellence wasn't optional, it was mandatory. I don't know how you do it, the young nurse marveled. 3 consecutive night shifts, and you still look like you could walk a runway. Sophia offered a small smile. Focus on the patients, Lily. Everything else is secondary. As she approached the nurse's station to complete her charts, Sophia felt a presence beside her. Before she saw him, the subtle scent of expensive cologne, announced Dr. Carter. Before his words did, Nurse Bennett, he drawled, leaning unnecessarily close as he reached for a patient file. Working overtime again? You know, I could think of more pleasurable ways to spend those extra hours. Without flinching or looking up from her documentation, Sophia replied, I believe your wife might have suggestions as well, Dr. Carter. Perhaps you should consult her. Her voice remained professional, neither cold nor heated, simply matter of fact. The doctor stiffened, then retreated with a forced chuckle. Always so serious, Bennett. Around the station, several nurses exchanged knowing glances. This wasn't the first time Dr. Carter had made inappropriate overtures, nor was it the first time Sophia had deflected them with unruffled composure. You should report him, whispered Nurse Lou, sliding into the chair beside her. And say what? Sophia asked, her pen moving steadily across the form. That he stands too close. Makes vague suggestions. He's careful to stay just on this side of actionable. It's still harassment. It's Tuesday, Sophia countered with a slight shrug. I choose my battles. This one isn't worth the energy. As she completed her paperwork, Sophia's mind drifted to her mother's voice, a constant presence in her thoughts. A woman's dignity is her armor in this world. Sophia, once you compromise it, you spend a lifetime trying to restore what was freely given away. Clara had raised her daughter alone after Sophia's father disappeared upon learning his child would be a girl, not the son he'd been boasting about to friends. His loss, Clara would say whenever Sophia asked about him as a child, he missed watching the most magnificent woman grow up. There was never bitterness in her voice, only certainty, as though his absence merely confirmed what she already knew about his character. Sophia gathered her belongings from her locker after completing her shift, exchanging the white uniform for dark jeans and a soft blue blouse. The hospital was fully awake now. Day shift, bustling through the corridors with fresh energy. Sophia, called Dr. Harris, the chief of cardiology, hurrying to catch her before she left. Unlike most of his colleagues, Dr. Harris, a 60-something gentleman with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, always addressed the nursing staff by their first names, viewing them as essential collaborators rather than subordinates. I'm glad I caught you, he said, slightly out of breath. That technique you used with Mr. Kumar yesterday, walking him through his breathing exercises while redirecting his anxiety about the procedure, was brilliant. Would you consider demonstrating it at next week's staff development? Sophia nodded, touched by the recognition. Of course, doctor, I'd be happy to. Excellent. And how's your mother? Has she recovered from that fall last month? Much better, thank you. The physical therapy is helping. Dr. Harris smiled warmly. Give her my regards and get some rest, Sophia. You've earned it. The conversation lingered pleasantly in Sophia's mind as she drove home through the awakening city. These moments when her skill and compassion were acknowledged not for how she looked, but for the difference she made, felt like victories. Her apartment was a modest one-bedroom in a mid-century building 20 minutes from the hospital. What it lacked in space, it made up for in character: large windows that welcomed morning light, warm wooden floors, and walls adorned with framed photographs of her mother, her nursing school graduation, and landscapes from the single splurge vacation she'd taken to Costa Rica 2 years ago. Sophia kicked off her shoes at the door and made her way to the kitchen, where she heated water for tea. While waiting for the kettle, she called her mother, as she did after every night shift. Morning, Mama, she said when Clara answered on the second ring. "There's my girl. How were the patients tonight?" "Mostly stable." Mrs. Lopez's grandchildren snuck in past visiting hours again. I pretended not to notice. Her mother's chuckle was warm through the phone. "Sometimes rules need bending when love is involved. Have you eaten?" "About to make some eggs before I sleep." "Good. A woman needs her strength, especially one carrying the weight of healing others." They spoke for 10 more minutes, their conversation flowing with the ease of two people who had been each other's constant for decades. Clara never failed to ask about Sophia's day, her dreams, her plans, treating her daughter's life as the most fascinating story unfolding. After they said their goodbyes, Sophia prepared a simple breakfast, ate while scanning a medical journal article, then showered and slipped into her favorite sleep shirt, an oversized cotton tee with "Nevertheless," she persisted printed across the front, a gift from her mother. As sleep claimed her, Sophia's thoughts drifted to tomorrow's challenges, a new cardiac patient being transferred to her floor, the staff development presentation she needed to prepare, and the persistent rumors of budget cuts that might affect nursing staff. But these concerns would wait. For now, she allowed herself the luxury of rest, knowing that her worth wasn't measured by others' perceptions, but by the standard she set for herself. In the quiet of her apartment, with sunlight filtering through partially drawn blinds, Sophia slept a woman of uncommon dignity in a world that too often failed to recognize it, unaware that her life was about to intersect with forces that would challenge everything she believed about love, privilege, and her own carefully constructed boundaries. Chapter 2. The Troubling Incident. 3 days after her conversation with Dr. Harris, Sophia found herself rushing toward the supply room on the 4th floor. A patient in critical condition needed specialized cardiac monitoring equipment, and every second counted. As she turned the corner, her steps faltered at the sound of male laughter echoing from inside the very room she needed to access. "I'm telling you, man, she's ice on the outside. But you know what they say about the quiet ones." A voice she recognized as Dr. Hughes carried through the partially open door. "Bennett's built like a goddess, but acts like she's better than everyone." Another voice chimed in. "Dr. Spencer, the new neurologist. Bet she wouldn't be so uptight if someone showed her a good time." Added a third voice, Dr. Sharma, whom Sophia had previously respected for his surgical skill. Sophia's hand froze on the door handle, her heart drumming against her ribs. The supply room was at the end of a seldom-used corridor, temporarily housing overflow equipment, while renovations were underway in the main storage area. Few people had reason to be there, especially 3 doctors at once. "Choose your battles," she reminded herself. The patient needed the equipment. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open. The 3 men fell silent instantly, exchanging glances before Dr. Hughes' face stretched into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nurse Bennett, we were just discussing the Hamilton case," he lied smoothly. "What brings you to this forgotten corner of the hospital?" "Cardiac monitor for room 418, Sophia replied, her voice controlled as she moved toward the shelving unit. The narrow space suddenly felt suffocating as the men shifted, effectively blocking her path to the equipment she needed. "No rush," Dr. Spencer said, leaning against the shelf. "Blake's handling it." "Dr. Martinez asked for me specifically," Sophia countered, taking another step forward. "Excuse me, please." None of them moved. Instead, Dr. Sharma crossed his arms, his gaze traveling down her body with deliberate slowness. "You know, Bennett, you could go far in this hospital with the right support. We were just saying what a waste it is that someone with your talents stays so isolated." Sophia met his gaze directly. "My talents are fully recognized by those whose opinions matter professionally." Her voice remained even, though her pulse raced. "Now, I need to access that equipment for a critical patient." "Always so serious." Dr. Hughes sighed, echoing Dr. Carter's frequent comment. "We're just being friendly, right, guys?" The other 2 nodded, their expressions suggesting Sophia was overreacting. "My patient is waiting," she said firmly. "Move aside, or I'll have to report that 3 senior doctors prevented me from accessing emergency equipment while making inappropriate comments." A tense silence followed. Then Dr. Spencer laughed, though the sound held no humor. "Can't even take a compliment." "This is why I'm requesting you step aside immediately," Sophia interrupted, her voice quiet but steely. "My responsibility is to my patient, not your ego." Something in her unwavering gaze must have communicated her resolve, because Dr. Sharma finally shrugged and moved away from the shelf. "Whatever, we were leaving anyway." As they filed past her, Dr. Hughes whispered, "Nobody likes a prude who thinks she's too good for everyone." Bennett. Sophia retrieved the equipment with steady hands, refusing to let them see how the encounter had affected her. Only after delivering the monitor to Dr. Martinez and ensuring the patient was stabilized did she allow herself a moment alone in the staff restroom, where she gripped the edge of the sink and took several deep breaths. Her mother's voice seemed to whisper in her ear, "When they try to make you small, stand tallest." By the end of her shift, Sophia had made her decision. She walked purposefully to Dr. Margaret Wong's office, the hospital's chief of staff, a formidable woman who had broken numerous glass ceilings throughout her 40-year career in medicine. "Come in," Dr. Wong called in response to Sophia's knock. The office was austere but elegant, much like the woman behind the desk. At 65, Dr. Wong's sleek bob was more silver than black, but her sharp eyes missed nothing as she gestured for Sophia to sit. "Nurse Bennett, this is unexpected. I apologize for the interruption, Dr. Wong." Sophia's posture remained perfectly straight as she recounted the supply room incident with clinical precision, neither embellishing nor downplaying what had occurred. Dr. Wong listened without interruption, her expression unchanging. When Sophia finished, the older woman removed her glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. "You realize they'll deny everything, claim you misinterpreted their professional camaraderie?" "Yes," Sophia replied simply, "but that doesn't change what happened." Dr. Wong studied her for a long moment. "You're one of our best nurses. Bennett, smart, dedicated, exceptional with difficult patients. Why risk making powerful enemies?" "With respect, Dr. Wong, I'm not the one who created this situation, and if staying silent is the price of advancement, it's too high." A hint of something approval perhaps flickered across the older woman's face. "Let me be blunt. The board is reluctant to discipline doctors without concrete evidence, especially ones bringing in research grants." She held up a hand when Sophia began to speak. "But I believe you, and I have an alternative solution that might interest you." She slid a folder across the desk. "Charles Hamilton, yes. That Hamilton is recovering from cardiac surgery. He's requested a private nurse for his home care. The position pays triple your current salary, with accommodations provided at the Hamilton estate for the 3-month recovery period." Sophia blinked, taken aback. "You want me to leave?" "I want you to consider an exceptional opportunity while I handle this situation," Dr. Wong corrected. "By the time Hamilton's recovery is complete, certain personnel changes will have occurred. The board may drag their feet on explicit harassment claims, but they move quite efficiently when reminded about liability issues regarding doctors who prevent access to emergency equipment." Sophia opened the folder, scanning the details of the position. The compensation was indeed substantial enough to help her mother move into a better apartment, pay off her remaining student loans, and still save considerably. "Why me?" she asked, looking up. "Because Hamilton specifically asked for someone unimpressed by my wealth, with impeccable credentials and, I quote, enough backbone to tell me when I'm being an ass." Dr. Wong's lips curved slightly. "I thought of you immediately." For the first time since entering the office, Sophia allowed herself a small smile. "I see. Take 24 hours to decide," Dr. Wong said, rising to indicate the meeting was concluding. "And, Bennett, whatever you choose, know that I expect a full incident report on my desk by tomorrow morning. Those three need to learn that actions have consequences regardless of where you're working next month." That evening, Sophia sat on her small balcony, phone in hand, her mother on speaker as she outlined the situation. "They offered you how much?" Clara exclaimed after Sophia mentioned the salary. "It's temporary, Mama, 3 months. References from the Hamiltons afterward," her mother pointed out pragmatically. "Baby, doors like this don't open every day, and it sounds like Dr. Wong is giving you a graceful exit while she cleans house." Sophia sighed, watching the city lights blink on as dusk settled. "It feels like I'm running away." "No." Clara's voice was firm. "It's advancing strategically. There's a difference." As Sophia prepared for bed, her decision crystallized. She would accept the position, but not before filing her report. Whatever awaited her at the Hamilton estate, she would face it as she faced everything with dignity intact and head held high, carrying her mother's wisdom like armor against whatever challenges came next. What she couldn't know was that the greatest challenge wouldn't come from Charles Hamilton, but from his enigmatic son, Ethan, a man whose reputation for careless privilege and casual relationships preceded him, but whose true nature remained hidden behind layers of carefully constructed indifference that only Sophia would eventually see beyond. Chapter 3. The Hamilton Estate. The Hamilton Estate sprawled across 5 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds in Westlake Hills, where old money had built palatial homes on the city's most coveted ridge. Sophia's modest sedan seemed out of place as she drove through wrought iron gates that parted silently upon her arrival. She had received clearance from security after providing her credentials, yet still felt like an intruder as she followed the curved driveway toward the main house. The three-story Georgian mansion loomed ahead, its limestone facade gleaming in the morning light, perfectly symmetrical windows reflecting the clear blue sky, while ivy climbed selectively placed trellises, giving the impression that nature itself had been carefully directed where to grow. Sophia parked where instructed, a designated spot far enough from the front entrance to avoid disrupting the estate's aesthetic, yet close enough to be practical for a healthcare professional who might need to leave quickly. She straightened her blouse, checked that her braids were neatly secured, and retrieved her medical bag from the passenger seat. "You must be Nurse Bennett," called a voice as Sophia approached the entrance. A woman in her 52nd with silver-streaked hair and an efficient manner stood in the open doorway. "I'm Mrs. Collins, the house manager. Mr. Hamilton is expecting you." The foyer Sophia entered seemed designed to impress, with a soaring ceiling, marble floors, and a grand staircase that curved elegantly to the second floor. Yet, despite its grandeur, the space felt strangely sterile, as though it existed for appearance rather than comfort. "This way, please, Mrs." Collins instructed, leading Sophia through a corridor lined with artwork that likely cost more than Sophia's entire education. "Mr. Hamilton requested your meeting take place in the solarium rather than his bedroom. He's determined not to be treated as an invalid." The solarium occupied the southeast corner of the house, with glass walls offering views of both the rose garden and the distant city skyline. Unlike the formal rooms they had passed, this space contained comfortable furniture and abundant plant life, a place where people actually lived rather than merely displayed their wealth. Charles Hamilton sat in a leather chair, a tablet in hand and a stack of documents on the table beside him. At 64, his steel-gray hair and commanding presence matched the photographs Sophia had seen in business magazines. What those images hadn't captured was the pallor beneath his tan, or the way his hand trembled slightly as he set down the tablet. "Mr. Hamilton, Nurse Sophia Bennett has arrived," Mrs. Collins announced. Charles's assessing gaze reminded Sophia of Dr. Wong. "Clinical. Evaluating. Missing nothing. Nurse Bennett, Margaret speaks highly of you, says you don't suffer fools and know your medicine. Both qualities I appreciate." "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Hamilton," Sophia replied, setting her bag on a nearby table and removing the digital tablet containing his records. "I've reviewed your case thoroughly. Would you prefer I outline my proposed care plan now? Or would you like to establish your expectations first?" A hint of approval flickered across his face. "Direct. Good. My expectations are simple. Help me recover quickly. Tell me the truth about my condition without sugarcoating it, and maintain your professional discretion about anything you see or hear in this house." "I can agree to all three," Sophia said with a nod, "though I should clarify that quick recovery doesn't mean cutting corners medically. Your surgery was significant, and pushing too hard too soon could lead to setbacks rather than progress." Rather than bristling at her candor, Charles actually smiled, a slight upward curve of his mouth that transformed his stern features momentarily. "Dr. Wong said you'd keep me honest. Now, about those care plans." For the next 40 minutes, they discussed his medication schedule, exercise restrictions, dietary requirements, and follow-up appointments. Throughout their conversation, Sophia observed his breathing, color, and energy levels, making mental notes about his condition beyond what appeared in the medical records. "Your heart rate increases when you discuss your company," she noted, after he became animated, explaining a pending acquisition. "We need to monitor your stress levels, especially during business calls." "Good luck with that, Mrs. Collins murmured as she entered with a tray of tea. "Mr. Hamilton considers relaxation a foreign concept." "I built Hamilton Industries by working harder than everyone else, Catherine," Charles replied without rancor. "Old habits and new ones will be necessary for optimal recovery," Sophia interjected smoothly. "Your heart has undergone significant trauma. It requires time to heal, just as any injured muscle would." Charles studied her with newfound interest. "Most people in this house hesitate to contradict me, Nurse Bennett. I'm not employed to agree with you, Mr. Hamilton. I'm employed to help you recover." He nodded slowly. "Refreshing. Catherine will show you to your quarters. I expect our first official session to begin at 2 this afternoon after my conference call with Tokyo." As Sophia followed Mrs. Collins through the labyrinthine house, she catalogued landmarks to orient herself. A distinctive painting here, an unusual sculpture there. Her assigned suite was located in the east wing, close enough to Charles's rooms for quick access, but separated enough to provide privacy. "These will be your accommodations," Mrs. Collins said, opening double doors to reveal a sitting room appointed in soft blues and creams, with a separate bedroom and private bath beyond. The kitchen staff serves meals at 7, 12, and 6. But you may request food at any time. Your schedule with Mr. Hamilton will likely be irregular, so arrangements have been made to accommodate that. Sophia set her suitcase down, momentarily overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding her. The room was larger than her entire apartment, with windows overlooking a reflection pool where water lilies floated serenely. "Thank you, Mrs. Collins. This is—" Her words were cut short by the distant sound of a door slamming, followed by raised voices. Mrs. Collins' expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "That would be the younger Mr. Hamilton," she said with practiced neutrality. "Ethan has recently returned from abroad." Before Sophia could respond, heavy footsteps approached, and a male voice called out, "Catherine, is my father in the solarium? He's resting." "Mr. Ethan," Mrs. Collins replied as a figure appeared in the doorway. Ethan Hamilton leaned against the doorframe with casual insolence. His appearance was a stark contrast to the household's ordered precision, his dark hair slightly too long, his expensive clothes rumpled, as though he'd slept in them. Despite this, or perhaps because of it, he possessed a magnetic presence that seemed to compress the air in the room. "Resting? That's new," he remarked, his gaze sliding from Mrs. Collins to Sophia, assessing her with a glance that managed to be both dismissive and inappropriately thorough. "Ah, the nurse, another addition to my father's collection of employees. Mr. Ethan, this is Nurse Bennett," Mrs. Collins began, her tone suggesting this wasn't the first time she'd managed such introductions. "Charmed, I'm sure," Ethan drawled, making no move to extend his hand or properly introduce himself. "A word of advice, Nurse Bennett, whatever he's paying you, it won't be worth the pound of flesh he'll demand in return." The statement hung in the air, its bitterness palpable. Sophia met his gaze directly, refusing to be unsettled. "Thank you for the concern, Mr. Hamilton. However, my contract is quite specific about the services I'm providing: cardiac care and rehabilitation. Nothing more." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps at her composed response. He straightened slightly, studying her with marginally more interest. "We'll see." Then he was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive cologne and the lingering impression of someone who wore his privilege like armor against genuine connection. Mrs. Collins sighed almost imperceptibly. "Please excuse Mr. Ethan. He and his father have a complicated relationship." "Most family relationships are," Sophia replied diplomatically. Left alone to unpack, Sophia considered the day's introductions. Charles Hamilton was exactly as she'd expected, demanding, direct, accustomed to control. His son, however, presented a more complex puzzle. Beneath Ethan's carefully cultivated indifference, she had glimpsed something troubling in his eyes, not merely the entitlement she'd anticipated, but a hollowness that all his wealth couldn't seem to fill. Her mother had always told her to be wary of damaged people with power. As Sophia arranged her medical supplies in precise order, she decided that Ethan Hamilton would be someone to maintain professional distance from a resolution she would find increasingly difficult to keep in the days ahead. Chapter 4. Beneath the surface. By her third day at the Hamilton estate, Sophia had established an efficient routine. Mornings began with checking Charles's vitals before his 6 a.m. Awakening, the man adhered to the same schedule he'd maintained for 40 years, cardiac surgery notwithstanding. She supervised his medication, monitored his supervised exercise sessions, and attended the daily briefings, where Charles insisted on managing his business empire despite doctor's orders. "Your blood pressure spikes every time Harrison mentions the Singapore deal," Sophia noted after one particularly tense video call with Charles's executive team. She recorded the reading in her digital log, her expression neutral but her tone firm. "We discussed stress management, Mr. Hamilton." "Impossible to avoid stress completely in my position," Charles replied, though he did lean back in his chair as instructed, practicing the breathing techniques she'd taught him. "Not completely, but we can implement better strategies, perhaps delegate the Singapore negotiations temporarily." Charles' eyebrows rose. "You understand what was being discussed?" "I understand enough," Sophia replied. "My father wasn't present in my life, but my mother made certain I received comprehensive education in finance alongside my medical training. She believed women should understand money as well as men do." "Smart woman, your mother," Charles observed, studying Sophia with new interest. "Most healthcare professionals zone out during these calls. My responsibility is your health, which includes understanding what affects it." She checked his pulse again. "Better now. Your next medication should be taken with food." Mrs. Collins mentioned lunch would be served on the terrace today. As they made their way through the house, Sophia couldn't help noticing that while every surface gleamed with polish and every object appeared valuable, the space lacked the warmth of a true home. No casual family photographs adorned the walls. No books sat half-read on side tables. No evidence that people lived rather than simply resided here. The terrace overlooked an Olympic-sized swimming pool where a solitary figure cut through the water with powerful strokes. Ethan Hamilton emerged from the pool just as they were seated, water cascading from broad shoulders as he reached for a towel. Without acknowledging their presence, he dried himself perfunctorily before dropping into a lounger 20 feet away, immediately absorbed in his phone. "You might join us for lunch, Ethan," Charles called, his tone making the invitation sound more like a summons. "Since you apparently have time for swimming, you must have time to eat." Ethan didn't look up. "I have plans." "You've had plans every day since your return," Charles observed dryly. "Strange how none of them involve Hamilton Industries." "Not strange at all," Ethan replied, finally glancing their way. "Entirely intentional." In fact, the exchange crackled with familiar tension, a well-worn argument conducted in shorthand. Sophia focused on arranging Charles' medication beside his plate, providing a semblance of privacy despite her presence. "Nurse Bennett," Ethan called suddenly, his gaze shifting to her with unexpected intensity. "What's your professional opinion? Is my father well enough to be aggravated by family matters, or should he be spared the disappointment of his only son and heir for a few more weeks?" The question was designed to provoke, but Sophia met his gaze evenly. "My professional opinion is that moderate social interaction is beneficial for recovery, Mr. Hamilton, particularly interactions that don't dramatically elevate blood pressure." Ethan's eyebrows rose slightly, whether at her measured response or her implied criticism, she couldn't tell. "See," Charles said with satisfaction, "even your nurse thinks you should join the family business discussions." "Actually," Sophia interjected calmly, "I said, moderate social interaction would be beneficial. I made no recommendation regarding business matters." She turned to Charles. "Your cardiologist specifically advised against full workdays for at least 6 weeks, Mr. Hamilton. That was in the discharge paperwork you signed." A fleeting expression crossed Ethan's face, surprise, followed by something that might have been reluctant appreciation. He stood abruptly. "Enjoy your lunch, Father. I have a flight to catch." With a mock salute to Sophia, he strode toward the house, phone already at his ear. "He wasn't always like this," Charles said after a long silence, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "After his mother left, things changed." Sophia maintained her professional demeanor, despite her curiosity. "I understand transitions can be difficult." She steered the conversation back to safer territory. "Now, about your afternoon schedule." Later that evening, Sophia called her mother as she did each night, settling into the window seat of her suite with a cup of chamomile tea. "The house is something from a magazine, Mama," she described, watching moonlight ripple across the reflection pool outside. "But it feels empty somehow." "Big houses often do," Clara replied. "Takes more than expensive things to make a home." "Charles Hamilton is exactly what I expected, demanding but straightforward." "His son is." She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Handsome," her mother supplied with a knowing chuckle. "Difficult," Sophia corrected, though she couldn't deny Ethan possessed a certain magnetism despite his attitude. "Deliberately so. I think like he's determined to fulfill every expectation of the privileged playboy. People wear masks for protection. Baby, you know that better than most. Remember how you used to hide behind those big books after your father left? Your mask was being the serious little girl who didn't need anyone. This is different, Mama. Ethan Hamilton isn't hiding insecurity. He's flaunting disregard for his father's health, for his family's legacy, for himself." "Maybe," Clara suggested gently, "sometimes the people who seem to care least actually care too much to risk showing it." Sophia was still considering her mother's words an hour later as she completed her evening rounds, checking Charles's vitals one final time before retiring. Walking back through the dimly lit corridor, she paused at the sound of glass breaking, followed by a muffled curse. The noise came from a room she hadn't entered before, a darkened study where moonlight spilled through tall windows, illuminating a figure hunched over a desk. Ethan sat with his head in his hands, an overturned whiskey glass and spreading puddle on the antique wood beside him. Sophia hesitated, about to withdraw quietly, when he looked up. Their eyes met, and for an unguarded moment, his face revealed something raw and vulnerable that made her breath catch. Then, like a shutter closing, his expression hardened into familiar disdain. "Come to check if the prodigal son is disrupting the patient's rest," he asked, his voice carrying a brittle edge. "I heard glass breaking." Sophia replied simply, "Medical instinct to investigate potential injuries." Ethan gestured to the spilled drink with exaggerated flourish. Just wounded pride and expensive scotch. Nurse Bennet, nothing requiring your professional attention. She should have left then. Everything about the situation screamed. Private moment, not medical emergency. Instead, surprising herself, Sophia crossed to the sideboard, where a pitcher of water stood. Hydration helps prevent the worst effects of alcohol, she said, pouring a glass and setting it before him with clinical precision. And nightmares? His head snapped up. Your father mentioned you returned from Tokyo 2 days ago. That's an 11-hour time difference. Sleep disturbances are common, often manifesting as vivid dreams or nightmares. She spoke matter-of-factly, offering scientific explanation rather than sympathy, sensing the latter would be rejected outright. Ethan studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he reached for the water. Is there anything you don't analyze with clinical detachment, Nurse Bennet? Many things, she replied honestly. But right now, I'm on duty. Always the professional. Do you ever stop being Nurse Bennet, let down that perfect composure, and just be Sophia? The way he said her name the first time he'd used it sent an unexpected ripple of awareness through her. Good night, Mr. Hamilton. The kitchen keeps ginger tea in the left cabinet. It helps with jet lag better than whiskey. As she turned to leave, his voice followed her, softer than before. Sophia. She paused at the threshold without looking back. Thank you for not mentioning this to my father. The vulnerability in those words hung in the air between them, a momentary bridge across their different worlds. Without turning, she nodded once, continuing down the corridor with measured steps that betrayed none of her inner confusion. That night, lying awake in her luxurious but unfamiliar bed, Sophia found herself revisiting the moment the moonlight on Ethan's face, the unguarded pain in his eyes before his defenses rose again, the way her name had sounded in his voice. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes the people who seem to care, to least actually care too much to risk showing it. Perhaps beneath Ethan Hamilton's carefully cultivated indifference lay something more complex than she had initially assumed, depths that his wealth and privilege had never taught him to navigate safely. The revelation was unwelcome, disrupting the professional distance she had intended to maintain. It was always easier to keep your composure around people who fit neatly into categories: patient, colleague, superior. But Ethan Hamilton, with his contradictions and glimpses of unexpected vulnerability, defied such simple classification, making him far more dangerous to Sophia's carefully ordered world than she cared to admit. Chapter 5. The night that changed everything. 2 weeks into her position at the Hamilton estate, Sophia had settled into a rhythm balancing Charles's care with maintaining professional boundaries. The initial awkwardness following her late-night encounter with Ethan had gradually subsided into polite, distant interactions when their paths crossed, which happened with increasing frequency as Ethan inexplicably spent more time at the estate. Today, Charles was preparing to attend his first public function since the surgery, a charity gala, where the Hamilton Foundation would announce a significant endowment. Though Sophia had advised against it, his cardiologist had reluctantly approved a brief appearance, provided Charles limit himself to 1 hour. I built this foundation 30 years ago, Charles said as Sophia checked his blood pressure. Missing the annual gala would start rumors about my health that could affect stock prices. Your health should be more important than stock prices, Mr. Hamilton. After completing her notes on Charles's pre-event vitals, Sophia began gathering her belongings. With both Hamiltons absent, she planned to use the evening to catch up on continuing education credits. You're leaving? Mrs. Collins asked, noticing Sophia's preparations. He assumed Mr. Hamilton wouldn't need me while he's out with you as his escort, Sophia explained. Nonsense, Charles interjected. Your contract includes residence here, specifically for emergencies. I expect you to remain on site. After they departed, Sophia had just settled in her suite when a knock interrupted her concentration. Ethan stood in the hallway, dressed in jeans and a simple gray Henley. Mr. Hamilton, she acknowledged. I thought you had dinner plans. Had. He confirmed. The house is empty except for us. You've been working consecutive shifts for 2 weeks. Go home, Sophia. Whatever my father's paying you, it doesn't include surrendering your entire life to this mausoleum. The use of her first name, combined with what appeared to be genuine concern, caught her off guard. I don't mind staying, but you don't need to, he insisted. Father won't return for hours, and I'm perfectly capable of calling you if there's an emergency. 20 minutes later, Sophia had packed an overnight bag, but stopped before reaching her car, the same intuition that had saved patients when monitors showed no cause for concern. She stood in the driveway, looking back at the illuminated mansion against the darkening sky. You're being ridiculous, she told herself. Go home. Yet something kept her rooted in place. With a sigh, She turned and walked back inside. The house was quiet as she re-entered. She made her way to the media room where Ethan had said he'd be, intending to let him know she'd changed her mind about leaving. The room was empty, a half-eaten sandwich, an untouched drink abandoned on the coffee table. Sophia was about to leave when a strange sound reached her, a gasping wheeze, followed by something heavy hitting the floor in the adjacent kitchen. She rushed through the connecting door to find Ethan collapsed on the marble tiles, his face alarmingly swollen, lips blue-tinged as he struggled to breathe. Anaphylaxis. Sophia diagnosed instantly, dropping to her knees beside him. "Ethan, do you have an EpiPen? Where is it?" His eyes widened in recognition, one hand weakly gesturing toward the second floor. "I'm calling an ambulance, but we can't wait," she said, already dialing with one hand while checking his pulse with the other. "I need to get your epinephrine. I'll be right back." Sophia sprinted through the house to Ethan's bedroom, a space unexpectedly austere compared to the rest of the house, with monochromatic furnishings and bookshelves filled with well-worn volumes. In the ensuite bathroom's medicine cabinet, she found an insulated case containing 2 EpiPens, back downstairs in under a minute. She found Ethan's condition deteriorating rapidly. "I'm administering epinephrine," she told him, pressing the injector firmly against his outer thigh for 3 seconds. "Help is coming," she said, maintaining the calm tone that had steadied countless patients. "The epinephrine will work quickly. Try to stay with me, Ethan." As if in response, his next breath came marginally easier. Sophia elevated his legs using cushions, continuing to monitor his vital signs. When his eyes flickered open, focusing with difficulty on her face, Sophia felt relief wash through her with startling intensity. "You came back," he managed, the words barely audible. "I forgot my charger," she replied with a small smile. "What triggered this?" "Sandwich sesame seed bun," he whispered. "Kitchen staff knew." In the ambulance, Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness as the paramedics administered additional medication. Sophia maintained physical contact throughout the journey, her hand on his arm, a tether to consciousness. At the hospital, she provided his medical history to the attending physician, then stepped back as the emergency team took over. Only then did the full impact of what had nearly happened hit her. She sank into a waiting room chair, suddenly aware of her own racing heart. Hours passed in the sterile hospital corridor she called Charles, interrupting the gala. She coordinated with Mrs. Collins about retrieving necessary items from Ethan's room. She checked regularly with the medical team. What she didn't do was leave. Dawn was breaking when Ethan was moved from emergency to a private room. Sophia stood in the doorway, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. As if sensing her presence, his eyes opened, finding hers across the room with surprising clarity. "You stayed," he said, his voice hoarse but stronger. Sophia moved to his bedside, automatically checking the monitors. "Of course I stayed. It's my job." "No," Ethan replied, holding her gaze. "Your job is looking after my father." This was something else. The moment stretched between them, weighted with implications neither was prepared to address. Finally, Sophia adjusted his IV line, a deliberately professional gesture. "You should rest. Your body's been through significant trauma." "Sophia," he caught her wrist as she turned to leave. His touch light, but arresting. "Thank you for coming back, for knowing what to do, for staying." The simple sincerity in his voice stripped away the last of her professional distance. For the first time since arriving at the Hamilton estate, she allowed herself to see Ethan not as the difficult son of her patient or the entitled playboy, but simply as a man, one whose life had nearly ended hours before, one whose relieved gaze now held something that made her pulse quicken. "Get some sleep, Ethan," she said softly. "I'll be here when you wake up." As she settled into the chair beside his bed, Sophia knew it signified something more profound than professional obligation. In the space of one harrowing night, everything had changed, boundaries crossed, assumptions challenged, and connections forged that could never be undone. Chapter 6. New Eyes. 3 days after his anaphylactic episode, Ethan returned to the Hamilton estate with discharge instructions. Sophia had memorized more thoroughly than he had. Though technically still assigned to Charles's care, she found herself dividing her attention between father and son, a situation Charles himself encouraged with surprising enthusiasm. "He actually took his antihistamines without argument when you reminded him," Charles remarked over breakfast. "The hospital staff said he was a nightmare patient until you arrived." Each morning, Sophia maintained her professional expression. Medical compliance often improves with consistent care providers. Is that what they're calling it these days? Charles's eyes held a knowing gleam. Later that afternoon, Sophia found Ethan in the solarium laptop open. but attention focused on the garden beyond the glass walls. He wore reading glasses, something she'd never seen before, giving him an unexpectedly scholarly appearance. "Your father's calling a board meeting in 30 minutes, she informed him. Setting his medication on the table, he asked if you'll be joining remotely or in person. Ethan removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "In person, I suppose. Can't have the old man getting too excited trying to explain quarterly projections." The consideration behind the complaint wasn't lost on Sophia. Since his hospitalization, she'd noticed subtle shifts in Ethan's behavior toward his father, still marked by friction, but tempered with moments of genuine concern. "These need to be taken with food," she reminded him, placing a small plate beside the pills. "Playing nurse to both Hamiltons now?" Ethan asked, though the question lacked his former bite. "Just ensuring the considerable investment in your medical care doesn't go to waste," she replied, turning to leave. "Sophia," he called, stopping her, "would you stay a moment?" The request held none of his usual commanding tone. Curious, despite herself, Sophia settled into a chair across from him. "Is there something you need?" Ethan studied her with an intensity that made her acutely aware of every detail of her appearance. "Why nursing?" he asked abruptly. "With your intelligence, you could have chosen any number of more lucrative professions. Not everything is about money, Mr. Hamilton." "Ethan," he corrected. "After saving my life and spending 3 nights in an uncomfortable hospital chair, I think you've earned first-name basis." "Why nursing, Sophia?" he repeated. Softer now, she considered deflecting again, but something in his genuine curiosity made her answer honestly. "My grandmother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when I was 14. The doctors were clinical focused on treatment protocols and statistics, but there was a nurse, Eliza, who saw beyond the disease to the person. She taught me that healing isn't just about medicine, it's about preserving dignity through vulnerability." When she died, my grandmother was holding Eliza's hand, not a doctor's. Ethan absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. "And the financial education, your mother's influence, you said." "My mother cleaned offices at an investment firm after my father left. Instead of leaving me with sitters she couldn't afford, she'd take me along. One of the analysts started giving me math problems to solve while I waited. By 16, I was helping my mother manage a modest portfolio that eventually paid for my nursing school, hence my understanding of the Singapore acquisition discussion. I understand the principles, if not all the specifics," she acknowledged. "Finance can be learned. Compassion is harder to acquire." Something shifted in Ethan's expression. "You think I lack compassion?" It wasn't a question, but Sophia answered as if it were. "I think wealth can insulate people from experiences that foster compassion. It's not a judgment, just an observation." "What else have you observed about me?" Ethan leaned forward. "I'm curious what conclusions your clinical eye has drawn. That you're intelligent but deliberately underperform to lower expectations. That you use indifference as a shield against disappointment. That your relationship with your father is complicated by events you never discuss." She hesitated before adding, "And that your bedroom contains more classic literature than I'd have expected from someone who cultivates a careless Playboy image." A startled laugh escaped him. "Caught during your emergency raid for the EpiPen? Should I be concerned about what else you noticed while saving my life? That despite having the financial resources for the latest in everything, you keep a photograph of a woman I assume is your mother on your nightstand, in a frame that's been repaired rather than replaced." Ethan's amusement faded, replaced by a guarded expression that made Sophia regret her words immediately. "I apologize," she said quickly. "That was intrusive." "No," he replied after a pause. "It was accurate." He picked up his medication, swallowing it before continuing. "My mother left when I was 12, Australia. New husband, new children. The frame broke during one of my father's attempts to remove her photograph from my room. I glued it back together." The simple statement revealed more about the Hamilton family dynamics than hours of observation had. Sophia felt a sudden ache of recognition. A child desperately preserving connections to an absent parent. "My father sent me a birthday card when I turned 13. She offered quietly, "The only acknowledgement I ever received from him. I kept it until the paper wore thin at the folds." Ethan met her gaze, a moment of shared understanding, passing between them that transcended their different circumstances. For the first time, Sophia saw him clearly, not as Charles Hamilton's difficult son or as the entitled heir to a fortune, but as someone shaped by the same fundamental human experiences of loss and longing that had formed her own character. "We should head to the office," she said finally, rising. "Your father will be waiting." As May approached, these conversations became routine moments stolen between Charles's care schedule and Ethan's gradually increasing involvement in Hamilton Industries. Sometimes they discussed books. Other times, business strategies, occasionally more personal matters. He built it selling cheap lumber to developers after World War II. Ethan explained one evening as they walked the estate grounds, "My father transformed it into a global corporation. Everyone expects me to take it further. But you have reservations," she supplied when he trailed off. "The methods that built our fortune wouldn't be acceptable today," he said. "Clear-cutting forests, exploiting regulatory loopholes, aggressive acquisition tactics that destroyed smaller businesses. My father sees adaptation to ethical standards as necessary public relations. I see it as fundamental to the company's future." "Have you told him this?" Ethan laughed without humor. "Repeatedly. He hears criticism of his life's work, not vision for sustainable growth. It's easier to play the irresponsible heir than fight battles I can't win." "So you sabotage yourself instead," Sophia challenged. "That seems like surrender, not strategy." He studied her with newfound interest. "Most people in my life either agree with everything I say or dismiss me entirely. You do neither. Would you prefer false agreement?" she asked. "No," he replied thoughtfully. "I prefer truth even when uncomfortable." Sophia couldn't ignore the evolution occurring not just in Ethan, but in herself. The professional distance she prided herself on maintaining had subtly eroded, replaced by something she hesitated to name. "What happens after next week?" Ethan asked one evening as darkness fell around them. "When my father's condition no longer requires full-time care." The question acknowledged the inevitable conclusion of her assignment and the uncertain future of whatever was developing between them. "I don't know," Sophia admitted, the honesty both frightening and liberating. "This wasn't in any care plan I developed." What she couldn't articulate even to herself was the fear underlying her uncertainty, not of professional impropriety or cultural differences, but of recognizing that somewhere between saving Ethan's life and seeing the person behind his carefully constructed facade, Sophia Bennett had begun to care for someone in a way that threatened the self-sufficiency she had built her identity upon, and that, more than any external complication, was what truly terrified her. Chapter 7. Unexpected Feelings. The Hamilton Industries quarterly executive meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock a.m. Sharp in the downtown headquarters 10 weeks after his surgery, Charles insisted on attending in person. His first appearance since the procedure. After reviewing his cardiac stress test results and consulting with Dr. Harris, Sophia reluctantly agreed, on the condition that she accompany him. "Unnecessary," Charles grumbled, as they rode the elevator to the executive floor, though he had acquiesced surprisingly easily. Executives in impeccable suits rose when Charles entered the boardroom, their expressions carefully balanced between deference and assessment. Sophia positioned herself unobtrusively against the wall, medical bag at her feet. The meeting proceeded efficiently until the boardroom door opened mid-presentation and Ethan entered. Collective surprise rippled through the room. While Ethan held the title of Executive Vice President, his attendance at routine meetings had been sporadic at best. Today, however, he wore a perfectly tailored suit, his usually casual hair styled with deliberate care, tablet in hand. "Apologies for the delay," he said, taking the vacant chair at his father's right. "Traffic accident on the bridge." For the next hour, Sophia witnessed something remarkable. Ethan, functioning not as the reluctant heir, but as a knowledgeable executive with unexpected command of international markets and sustainability metrics, he challenged assumptions and offered alternative approaches that clearly surprised everyone, present his father most of all. During a brief recess, Charles approached where Sophia stood. "Did you know about this?" he asked quietly, nodding toward Ethan, who was engaged in conversation with two senior executives. "About what, specifically?" "Mr. Hamilton? My son actually prepared, actually engaged." Charles's tone held equal parts, suspicion and hope. "He's attended 3 meetings this week, requested full access to the environmental impact studies for our Pacific Rim projects." Sophia maintained her professional demeanor despite her private satisfaction. "Perhaps your medical situation provided perspective on what matters to him." Charles studied her with shrewd assessment. Perhaps other factors have motivated this change. The meeting reconvened before Sophia could formulate a suitably neutral response to his implication. For the remaining 2 hours, she observed the subtle dynamics unfolding: Ethan's growing confidence as his contributions were acknowledged, Charles's gradual shift from skepticism to cautious approval, and the executive team's recalibration as they processed this unexpected development. When the meeting concluded, Ethan approached Sophia while his father was occupied with the CFO. "Well, how did I do?" he asked, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "That's hardly for me to judge, Mr. Hamilton," she replied, though she couldn't entirely suppress a small smile. "Your father seems impressed." "Not the evaluation I was seeking," Ethan said, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that had become increasingly familiar. but I'll take it as a start. Later that evening, the Hamilton estate bustled with unexpected activity as Ethan hosted several executives for an informal strategy session. Sophia, ensuring Charles took his evening medication, observed the transformation of the usually quiet house with private amazement. "He's never used the home office for actual work before," Charles commented. Watching his son lead the group through the corridor, always claimed the atmosphere stifled creative thinking. "People change," Sophia said simply. "Some faster than others," Charles replied with a knowing look that made her uncomfortably aware of her own shifting feelings. The next morning, Sophia was completing Charles's therapy session when Mrs. Collins appeared at the door, her expression unusually flustered. "Miss Victoria Langston has arrived unannounced," she announced with barely concealed disapproval. "She's insisting on seeing Mr. Ethan." Charles sighed. "Victoria Langston, daughter of Senator Langston, occasional companion of my son between his more exotic pursuits." Before Sophia could respond, the sound of an argument drifted from downstairs, a woman's voice, cultured but raised in obvious irritation, followed by Ethan's deeper tones. "Perhaps we should continue your exercises on the terrace," Sophia suggested to Charles, attempting to provide privacy for what was clearly a personal matter. "Nonsense," Charles replied with unexpected relish. "My prescribed walking route takes us directly past the main foyer doctor's orders, correct?" As they descended the stairs, the confrontation came into full view. Victoria Langston, willowy, blonde, and impeccably dressed in designer casual wear, stood with arms crossed, her perfect features arranged in practiced displeasure. Ethan faced her, his stance defensive but restrained. 3 weeks. Ethan. 3 weeks. Without a single call. And suddenly, you're too busy with meetings to join the Sinclair's yacht party, Victoria was saying as they approached. "Everyone's talking about it. My father asked if we'd broken up, and I had no idea what to tell him. Perhaps that we were never together in any formal sense," Ethan replied with remarkable patience. "We've accompanied each other to social functions. That's hardly a commitment." Victoria's gaze shifted, noticing Charles and Sophia's approach. Her expression immediately transformed into a gracious smile. "Charles, darling, you look wonderful. Recovery must be going splendidly." Charles acknowledged her with minimal enthusiasm. "Unexpected visit. Just trying to rescue your son from his sudden attack of corporate responsibility." She laughed, though it didn't reach her eyes. Her attention turned to Sophia, assessing her with a quick, dismissive glance. "And you must be the nurse, Sophia, is it? Ethan mentioned you were dedicated." Something in her tone transformed the word into an insinuation. "Miss Bennet has been instrumental in my recovery," Charles stated firmly. Victoria's smile remained fixed as she turned back to Ethan. "Perhaps your nurse could enlighten me on what's so pressing that you've ghosted your entire social circle. Surely patient care doesn't require 24-hour devotion after all this time." Ethan's expression hardened. "That's enough, Victoria. What I'm simply asking. You're implying something inappropriate about a healthcare professional who saved my life," Ethan interrupted, his voice quiet but intense. "And I won't allow it." Victoria stepped back, genuine surprise replacing her practiced poise. "My God, it's true then." "What's true?" Ethan asked wearily. "Eleanor said you were different since your medical incident, that you'd been seen at corporate headquarters, missing charity galas." Her eyes narrowed as she looked between Ethan and Sophia. "But it's more than that, isn't it? You've actually fallen for your father's nurse." The accusation hung in the air. Sophia felt her professional composure threatening to crack under the scrutiny of 3 pairs of eyes. Victoria's coldly assessing, Charles's calculatingly observant, and Ethan's filled with something unreadable but intense. "Miss Langston," Sophia began, determined to diffuse the situation professionally. "Mr. Hamilton's recovery requires structure and consistency. His son has been supportive of that regimen, which naturally impacts his previous social schedule." "How diplomatic," Victoria replied with false sweetness. "Well, don't let me disrupt the regimen." She turned to Ethan, her voice dropping. "When you're finished playing corporate reformer with your new inspiration, you know where to find me." After her departure, an uncomfortable silence descended. Charles, displaying unexpected tact, excused himself to take a business call, leaving Ethan and Sophia alone in the foyer. "I apologize for that," Ethan said finally. "Victoria has always had a talent for creating scenes. No apology necessary," Sophia replied, maintaining her professional tone despite the turmoil beneath. "It's not uncommon for a patient's recovery to affect family dynamics. Is that what this is to you, a clinical observation of family dynamics?" Ethan asked, stepping closer, because what just happened felt considerably more personal than professional. Sophia met his gaze directly. "What I think doesn't matter. What matters is maintaining appropriate boundaries while I'm employed here. And after?" The question was barely above a whisper. Before she could answer, Charles called from his study, requesting assistance with his oxygen levels after the unexpected stress. The moment shattered, leaving Sophia to retreat into her professional role while Ethan watched her go, his expression revealing more than he had ever verbally acknowledged about his unexpected feelings for the woman who had saved more than just his physical life. Chapter 8. The Proposition. 2 months into Sophia's assignment at the Hamilton estate, Charles' recovery had progressed remarkably. His stamina had improved to the point where he now spent 3 days a week at corporate headquarters. His medication had been reduced, and his latest echocardiogram showed significant healing. Dr. Harris had expressed satisfaction bordering on amazement during their last follow-up appointment. "Whatever you're doing, Nurse Bennett, keep doing it," he had said. Reviewing Charles's results, "I rarely see such consistent progress in patients this age, especially those determined to ignore half my instructions." Charles had merely smiled. "Good genes and better nursing care. When can I resume my full schedule?" On the drive back to the estate, Charles had been unusually contemplative. "You know, Nurse Bennett, I've been observing Ethan these past weeks. The transformation is remarkable. He's found his own motivation." Sophia had replied carefully. Indeed, Charles's shrewd gaze had studied her profile, and I believe I understand the source of that motivation. The Hamilton legacy requires both business acumen and personal stability to flourish. Ethan finally seems to have found both. That question now occupied Sophia's thoughts as she updated her patient notes in the estate's sunlit kitchen. The original 3-month timeline would conclude in just 4 weeks, and Charles's improvement suggested he might not require full-time care much longer. The realization should have brought professional satisfaction instead. It filled her with an unsettling mixture of emotions she refused to examine too close. "Coffee?" Mrs. Collins offered, interrupting her thoughts. "You've been staring at that tablet for 10 minutes without typing a word." Sophia accepted the cup gratefully. "Just finalizing Mr. Hamilton's progress report." The house manager's non-committal response conveyed volumes after weeks of working alongside Sophia. Mrs. Collins had developed a disconcerting ability to see beyond her professional facade. "Mr. Hamilton is in his study with Mr. Ethan. They've been discussing the Brazil acquisition for nearly 2 hours without raising voices, something of a household record." The observation brought an involuntary smile to Sophia's lips. The evolution in the Hamilton men's relationship had been subtle but unmistakable. Ethan now regularly attended corporate meetings, often presenting alternative approaches that emphasized long-term sustainability over immediate profits. Charles, surprisingly, had begun listening to these proposals with increasing openness. "Mr. Ethan seems different these days," Mrs. Collins ventured. The casual observation belied by her shrewd gaze. "Recovery often affects entire family systems," Sophia replied with practiced neutrality. "Medical crises can realign priorities. Indeed, though, some changes seem more specifically influenced." Before Sophia could formulate a suitable response, the study door opened down the hall. She gathered her materials quickly, preparing to retreat to more neutral territory. But Charles's voice stopped her. "Nurse Bennett, join us for a moment." The study reflected Charles's personality, perfectly organized, imposing. Every object selected for significance rather than aesthetics. Ethan stood by the window, his posture tense in a way Sophia had learned to recognize as discomfort rather than anger. "We've been discussing my return to full corporate responsibilities," Charles explained, gesturing for Sophia to sit. "Dr. Harris believes another month of monitoring would be prudent, but agrees I no longer require around-the-clock nursing care." "That's excellent news," Sophia said, ignoring the hollow sensation beneath her professional response. "Your recovery has exceeded initial projections due in large part to your care," Charles acknowledged with uncharacteristic warmth. "Which brings me to a proposition I was just discussing with my son." Ethan's expression tightened further. "Father, hear me out," Charles interrupted, holding up one hand. "Hamilton Industries faces significant transitions in the coming years. My health situation, while improving, has emphasized the importance of secure succession planning." Sophia glanced between them, uncertain where this corporate discussion was leading or why it required her presence. "Ethan has demonstrated unexpected commitment these past weeks," Charles continued. "The board has noticed, I've noticed." His gaze settled on Sophia with uncomfortable directness. "And I've observed the catalyst for this transformation." Understanding dawned with chilling clarity. Sophia maintained her composure through sheer professional discipline. "A permanent arrangement would benefit all parties," Charles stated matter-of-factly. "Ethan clearly respects your intelligence and judgment. You've proven your discretion and integrity. The Hamilton name carries significant influence, and the family requires someone with both backbone and grace to carry it forward. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. I've watched how you handle difficult situations with dignity, how you've stood up to me when necessary. The board members have noticed your influence on Ethan. Even Harrison mentioned how impressed he was with your grasp of our Southeast Asian market concerns. The clinical assessment of her suitability as a potential Hamilton bride struck Sophia like a physical blow. She had faced objectification before, had developed defenses against the reduction of her person to her appearance or utility. But this calm evaluation of her qualities as a corporate asset left her momentarily speechless. Ethan, this discussion is over, he said, his voice low with controlled anger. Sophia isn't a commodity to be acquired because she's proven valuable. I meant no offense, Charles said, appearing genuinely surprised by their reactions. I'm simply acknowledging reality. You've changed since she arrived. The company benefits from that change. Formalizing the connection seems logical. Logic has nothing to do with it, Ethan replied sharply. This isn't the 18th century. You don't get to arrange marriages to consolidate business interests. Sophia found her voice at last. While I appreciate your confidence in my ability, Mr. Hamilton, my professional relationship with your family concludes when my contract ends. Any suggestion of other arrangements is inappropriate. See? Ethan gestured toward her with something like pride. This is exactly why your proposition is absurd. Sophia deserves better than a calculated alliance with our dysfunctional family. The defense, while well-intentioned, stung in its own way. Sophia stood, reclaiming her professional distance with effort. I should check your midday readings, Mr. Hamilton, and I believe Ethan has a conference call scheduled. Of course, Charles nodded, apparently untroubled by their reaction to his suggestion. We'll revisit your contract extension next week. In the hallway, Ethan caught up to Sophia, his expression apologetic. I'm sorry about that. He means well in his emotionally stunted way. There's no need to apologize, she replied, striving for a neutrality she didn't feel. Your father views everything through a pragmatic lens. That's a diplomatic way of describing his complete disregard for normal human feelings. Ethan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. For what it's worth, I told him the idea was inappropriate before you arrived. Because I'm your father's nurse or because I'm not suitable for the Hamilton name? The question escaped before she could contain it. Ethan stared at her, genuine shock replacing his irritation. Because you deserve to be valued for yourself, not for what you might contribute to a corporate legacy. Because relationships should develop naturally, not through parental manipulation. His voice softened. And because if anything ever happened between us, I'd want it to be real, not arranged. The hypothetical if hung between them, transforming the corridor's air into something electric with unacknowledged possibilities. Before either could navigate this dangerous terrain, the sharp ring of the doorbell interrupted the moment. Mrs. Collins' voice floated from the foyer, followed by an unfamiliar female voice that nonetheless caused Ethan to freeze. His expression transformed to something Sophia had never witnessed before, a combination of disbelief and old pain that made him suddenly look younger, more vulnerable. That's not possible, he whispered. She's in Australia. She's been in Australia for 20 years. Then the visitor appeared at the end of the hallway, a slender woman in her 62nd, elegantly dressed, with Ethan's unmistakable eyes and bearing. Vivian Hamilton had returned to the family she'd abandoned. Her timing as impeccable as it was devastating. Hello, darling, she said to her son, her cultured voice carrying down the corridor. Aren't you going to welcome your mother home? Chapter 9. The matriarch returns. Time seemed to crystallize in the hallway of the Hamilton estate. Ethan stood motionless, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and something more complex as he faced the mother who had abandoned him 2 decades earlier. Sophia instinctively stepped back, recognizing a moment too private for witnesses. Mother, Ethan finally said, the single word carrying the weight of 20 years of absence. This is unexpected. Vivian Hamilton moved forward with practiced grace, designer heels clicking purposefully on the marble floor. Darling, you look tired, and your hair needs attention. She reached as if to touch his face, but Ethan subtly shifted beyond her reach. What are you doing here? He asked, his voice controlled but taut with tension. A mother needs reasons to visit her son. Vivian's gaze drifted past him to Sophia, assessing her with cool precision. And who might this be? Before either could respond, Charles appeared in the study doorway, his expression hardening at the sight of his ex-wife. Vivian, the courtesy of advance notice continues to elude you. Charles. She acknowledged him with a slight nod. You're looking recovered. I received the Family Foundation's notification about your surgery. Naturally, I was concerned. Naturally, Charles echoed with evident skepticism. After 2 decades of radio silence, the tension thickened palpably. Sophia began a discreet retreat, but Vivian's voice stopped her. "You haven't introduced your staff, Charles. This is Nurse Bennett." Ethan interjected before his father could respond. "She's been instrumental in Father's recovery." Vivian's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. "A live-in nurse. How progressive of you, Charles." "Miss Bennett is a highly qualified healthcare professional, recommended by Dr. Wong herself," Charles replied, his tone warning against further comment. Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. "How fortunate you found someone so dedicated. Will you join us for lunch, Miss Bennett? I'm eager to hear about my ex-husband's progress. I have reports to complete, but thank you," Sophia replied with professional courtesy, recognizing the dismissal beneath the invitation. "Mr. Hamilton, I'll check your readings at 2 as scheduled." As she walked away, Sophia heard Vivian's voice drop to a stage whisper. "Really, Charles, there must be facility options that don't require housing medical staff in the family residence." The remainder of the day unfolded in a series of carefully choreographed maneuvers. As the Hamilton family navigated Vivian's unexpected return, Sophia maintained her professional routine while minimizing her presence in family spaces, acutely aware of the charged atmosphere. Mrs. Collins' tight expression and the staff's hushed conversations confirmed that Vivian's return had disrupted more than just Ethan's composure. Shortly before dinner, Sophia was recording Charles's evening vitals when Vivian appeared in the doorway of his suite. "Still monitoring every breath, I see," she observed with manufactured pleasantness. "Charles, darling, might I have a private word with Miss Bennett?" Charles glanced between them, frowning. "Sophia is completing my medical checks, which can surely wait 5 minutes," Vivian insisted. Her tone, professional, too professional. After an uncomfortable pause, Charles nodded reluctantly. "I'll review those quarterly reports." Ethan left. 5 minutes. Vivian. When they were alone, Vivian's demeanor transformed instantly. "Let's dispense with pleasantries. Miss Bennett, I understand you've made yourself quite indispensable during my absence." "I've provided the medical care Mr. Hamilton required," Sophia replied evenly, "and apparently much more." Vivian moved further into the room, her expensive perfume filling the space. Catherine mentioned the charming arrangement Charles proposed earlier. "Quite the opportunity for someone of your background." The implication was unmistakable. Sophia met the older woman's gaze directly. "There is no arrangement, Mrs. Hamilton. Your ex-husband made an inappropriate suggestion that was immediately declined." How refreshingly principled. Vivian's skepticism was palpable, or perhaps strategic. "Refusing immediately only increases your perceived value." "I don't require validation of my worth from the Hamilton family," Sophia stated, maintaining her composure. "My contract concludes in 4 weeks, after which I'll return to Metropolitan Hospital." Vivian studied her with cold calculation. "My son has always had a weakness for rescue projects, first injured animals, then damaged people. His last girlfriend was a recovering addict, a sculptor from Barcelona with fascinating track marks and tedious political opinions." "If you're implying I'm stating facts, Miss Bennett," Vivian interrupted smoothly. "Ethan becomes temporarily infatuated with people who represent something missing in his privileged life. Authenticity. Struggle. Whatever narrative he's constructed about you, dedicated healer, woman of principle, it follows his pattern. He'll move on once the novelty fades." The assessment, delivered with clinical detachment, struck uncomfortably close to fears Sophia had carefully avoided examining. Before she could respond, Ethan's voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." He stood in the doorway, his expression a carefully controlled mask of anger. "You lost the right to analyze my relationships when you walked out, Mother." Vivian turned, unfazed by her son's anger. "Darling, I'm merely having a professional conversation with your father's nurse." "No. You're doing what you've always done, asserting control through elegant cruelty." Ethan moved to stand beside Sophia, his proximity a clear statement. "Miss Bennett isn't a rescue project or a passing infatuation. She saved my life." The air in the room seemed to vibrate with unspoken emotion. Sophia maintained her professional demeanor, despite the rush of feelings Ethan's defense evoked. "Ethan," she said quietly, "this is unnecessary." "It's entirely necessary," he countered, gaze fixed on his mother. 20 years ago, I wasn't strong enough to confront your toxic behavior. I am now." Vivian's expression hardened momentarily before settling into practiced poise. "I see this conversation is pointless while you're in this state. We'll speak when you're more rational, darling." As she turned to leave, Charles appeared in the doorway, his expression thunderous. "I heard enough, Vivian. Your rooms are in the West Wing, as far from mine as structurally possible. I suggest you use them until we discuss your unexpected return and apparent opinions about my household. Our household, technically, Vivian corrected with deadly precision. The divorce settlement gave me continued ownership interest. If you recall, perhaps that's worth revisiting during my stay. After her departure, a heavy silence descended. Charles glanced between Ethan and Sophia, his expression softening marginally. I apologize for that spectacle, Nurse Bennett. Vivian's social graces have always been selectively applied. No apology necessary, Sophia replied automatically. I'll speak with her, Ethan stated, his voice tightly controlled. This won't happen again. I've handled far worse in hospital settings, Sophia assured them both, desperate to restore professional distance after the emotionally charged confrontation. If you'll excuse me, I should complete my evening rounds. Later, alone in her suite, Sophia finally allowed herself to process the day's events. Vivian Hamilton's return had instantly transformed the household dynamics, exposing fault lines and vulnerabilities in the family structure. More disturbingly, it had forced into the open feelings that Sophia had carefully contained behind professional boundaries. Ethan's defense had revealed more than his anger at his mother's behavior. It had confirmed what Sophia had been reluctant to acknowledge. Whatever was developing between them had progressed beyond professional appreciation or casual attraction into something far more dangerous to her carefully ordered life. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. When she opened the door, Ethan stood in the hallway, his earlier anger replaced by quiet determination. We need to talk, he said simply, about what happens next. Chapter 10. Midnight Confessions. This isn't an appropriate time, Sophia said. Though she stepped aside to allow Ethan into her suite, professional boundaries demanded privacy for difficult conversations, even as those same boundaries made this entire situation precarious. Ethan entered but remained near the door, respecting the invisible line between them. If we wait for appropriate timing in this household, we'll never speak honestly. The moonlight streaming through the windows cast half his face in shadow, a fitting visual for the man she'd come to know. Part privilege, part vulnerability, part carefully constructed facade, part authentic feeling. Your mother's return has been stressful, Sophia acknowledged, maintaining professional distance. Family dynamics often resurface during times of transition. Don't do that, Ethan said quietly. Don't retreat into clinical analysis, not with me. The simple request dismantled her defenses more effectively than any confrontation could have. Sophia moved to the window seat, putting space between them while acknowledging the conversation couldn't be avoided. What do you want me to say, Ethan? That your mother's assessment bothered me, that I've questioned my own professional judgment for allowing personal feelings to develop, that I'm counting the days until my contract ends because maintaining boundaries has become increasingly difficult? The admission hung in the air between them, more revealing than she had intended. I want you to be honest, he replied, about what's happening between us. Sophia looked out at the moonlit gardens, gathering her thoughts. What's happening is temporary, a consequence of proximity during an emotionally charged situation. Your father's illness, your allergic reaction crisis creates false intimacy. Is that what you believe, or what's safer to believe? His perception unsettled her. Sophia had always prided herself on clear-eyed assessment of situations. Yet Ethan had developed an unnerving ability to see past her professional composure to the uncertainties beneath. Both, perhaps, she admitted finally. My mother warned me about this becoming emotionally entangled with patients or their families. I'm not your patient, no, but your father is, which creates ethical complications. Ethan crossed to the opposite end of the window seat, close enough for conversation, but maintaining respectful distance. In 4 weeks, he won't be. Where does that leave us? In entirely different worlds, Sophia replied, voicing the practical reality she couldn't ignore. You're the heir to Hamilton Industries. I'm a nurse, returning to hospital shifts. That's circumstance, not essence, Ethan countered. If we're reducing ourselves to roles, we're no better than my mother with her outdated prejudices. Her concerns aren't entirely unfounded, Sophia said, surprising herself with the admission. Your interest in me developed during a period of personal transformation. What happens when that evolution stabilizes? When I'm no longer a catalyst but simply a woman with a very different background from yours? Ethan was silent for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her acutely aware of every breath between them. Do you know when I first realized something had changed for me? He asked finally. Sophia shook her head. The morning after my allergic reaction, I woke up in the hospital to find you asleep in that ridiculously uncomfortable chair, still wearing clothes stained with my emergency medications. Your braids had come partially undone, and you had this little frown, even in sleep, like you were monitoring my vitals in your dreams. The memory brought unexpected warmth to her cheeks. I was simply doing my job. No, Ethan contradicted gently. Your job ended when you handed me over to the hospital staff. Everything after that, staying through the night, coordinating with doctors who weren't even your colleagues, remembering my preference for ice chips over water when post-anaphylaxis nausea hit that went beyond professional obligation. He shifted slightly closer, his voice lowering. Want to know what I thought in that moment? I thought, this woman sees all my flaws and stays anyway, not because of my name or wealth or superficial charm, but despite all the barriers I've constructed to keep people at a comfortable distance. The simple honesty in his words resonated with something deep within Sophia, a recognition of the authentic connection that had developed beneath their outward differences. I should take a walk, she said suddenly, standing. The garden helps me think clearly. Understanding immediately, Ethan nodded. May I join you? Neutral territory might be better for this conversation. The estate gardens at night held a different magic than during daylight hours. Carefully tended flower beds released intoxicating fragrance into the night air, while strategic lighting created pools of gentle illumination among deepening shadows. They walked in silence until reaching a stone bench positioned to overlook the reflection pool. My mother taught me never to compromise my dignity for any relationship, Sophia said, finally, breaking the silence. She raised me to be self-sufficient, to build a life that didn't depend on anyone else's approval or support. Sounds like wisdom born from difficult experience, Ethan observed. She watched her mother stay with a man who diminished her daily because she feared being alone. Then my father left when I wasn't the son he wanted. Sophia traced patterns on the cool stone bench between them. Self-sufficiency became survival, and now you're wondering if whatever's developing between us threatens that independence. Ethan concluded with characteristic perception. Yes, she admitted, and whether the cultural and social differences would eventually create resentments, and whether your mother's assessment might contain elements of truth, that I represent something temporarily fascinating, but ultimately incompatible with your world. Ethan considered this with the serious reflection that had increasingly replaced his former casual dismissiveness. Valid concerns, all of them. I'd be lying if I claimed they were groundless. His honesty surprised her. Most men would immediately protest. I'm trying to deserve your respect, he replied simply. That requires honesty, even when uncomfortable. The statement, unadorned by charm or deflection, touched something within Sophia that pretty words could never have reached. I can't predict the future, Ethan continued after a moment. Can't guarantee that differences won't become challenges, or that my family's dysfunctions won't create obstacles. What I do know is that meeting you fundamentally changed something in me that needed changing. He turned to face her directly, moonlight illuminating the genuine emotion in his expression. Before you, I was sleepwalking through a life I resented but lacked the courage to alter. Your uncompromising authenticity showed me a different way to exist with purpose rather than passive opposition. That's a heavy responsibility to place on someone, Sophia said softly. It's not responsibility. It's recognition. Ethan corrected. You aren't obligated to maintain that influence, but I want you to know the impact you've had regardless of what happens next. A night breeze stirred the garden, carrying the scent of jasmine. In the distance, soft lights illuminated the main house, a world apart from this moment, suspended between what had been and what might be. I don't have answers tonight, Sophia said finally. My professional ethics, your family situation, our different backgrounds, these aren't simple obstacles to overcome with emotion alone. I'm not asking for answers, Ethan replied. Just the acknowledgement that what's happening between us deserves exploration beyond convenient dismissal as temporary or circumstantial. The request was reasonable, more thoughtful than she might once have expected from the man she'd first met. Perhaps that evolution itself was answer enough for tonight. I can acknowledge that, she conceded softly. Something shifted in Ethan's expression. Relief, perhaps, or quiet hope. He extended his hand halfway across the space between them, an invitation rather than a demand. Small steps, then beginning with honesty. After a moment's hesitation, Sophia placed her hand in his. The simple contact sent awareness coursing through her that had nothing to do with professional assessment and everything to do with fundamental human connection. Small steps, she agreed, in the garden's gentle darkness, with the estate's imposing silhouette standing witness. They sat together in a silence that contained more truth than all their previous words combined. No declarations of love or promises of forever. Just two people acknowledging that whatever path lay ahead, they would navigate it with eyes open to both possibilities and reality. When Ethan finally leaned forward, his intent clear in the moment before their lips met, Sophia made a conscious choice to meet him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle questioning rather than demanding, a beginning rather than a culmination. The connection between them felt both inevitable and extraordinary, a moment where barriers of background, circumstance, and initial misconceptions dissolved completely. replaced by recognition of something genuine and rare. As they walked back toward the house along moonlit garden paths, quite different from the hospital corridors, where Sophia's journey had begun, their hands remained linked. The distance seemed both shorter and more significant than before. Whatever challenges awaited Vivian's disapproval, Charles's strategic maneuvering, the inevitable scrutiny of the world beyond the estate gates tonight, had created something authentic between them that would require more than circumstance or prejudice to dismantle. Small steps indeed, but in a direction neither had anticipated when Sophia first arrived at the Hamilton estate, and for tonight, that acknowledgement was enough. Chapter 11. Against all odds. The Hamilton Foundation annual charity gala represented everything Sophia had spent her life working around rather than within old wealth, strategic philanthropy, and social hierarchies maintained through subtle signaling intelligible only to insiders, yet here she stood, at the entrance to the Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom, her simple black gown purchased specifically for this evening, a stark contrast to the designer creations surrounding her. "You look beautiful," Ethan murmured, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. "And completely terrified, not terrified," Sophia corrected quietly, "just aware that I'm entering a minefield without a map." After their garden conversation 3 nights ago, they had established tentative parameters for exploring their relationship, professional boundaries maintained during Sophia's remaining contract period, transparency with Charles about their personal connection, and most importantly, honest communication about concerns as they arose. Tonight represented their first public appearance together, a decision neither had taken lightly. Ethan had extended the invitation with uncharacteristic hesitation. "The gala is traditionally family-focused," he had explained. "My attending with someone signals intention. Are you certain that's wise right now?" Sophia had asked. "Your mother has made her opinions quite clear." Ethan's response had been simple. "I'm done hiding what matters to me." Now, standing at the periphery of Metropolitan City's social elite, Sophia focused on projecting the same quiet dignity that had guided her through hospital corridors and Hamilton family tensions alike. "Remember," Ethan said, sensing her internal recalibration, "half these people are my father's business associates who tolerate me out of necessity, and the other half are socialites who've watched me make an ass of myself at similar events for years. Their judgment is irrelevant." His self-deprecating honesty coaxed a smile from her. Quite the rousing pep talk. "I save my best material for corporate restructuring proposals," he replied with a wink, then grew serious. "Ready?" Sophia nodded, drawing strength from years of navigating challenging situations with professional poise. "Lead on, Mr. Hamilton." Their entrance generated precisely the ripple of attention Ethan had predicted. Conversations paused mid-sentence as curious gazes assessed Sophia, measuring her against whatever preconceptions Ethan's past companions had established. To her surprise, Charles approached immediately, his public demeanor more gracious than his typical gruffness. "Nurse Bennett," he greeted her with formal warmth. "I'm pleased you could join us this evening. Your presence is a testament to your impact on our family's recovery." The carefully worded acknowledgement provided context for her attendance that simultaneously honored her professional role while tacitly blessing her personal connection to his son. It was masterfully done. Exactly the diplomatic maneuvering one would expect from a corporate patriarch. "Thank you for including me, Mr. Hamilton," Sophia replied with equal care. "The Foundation's work in cardiac research is particularly meaningful given my professional background." "Indeed," Charles nodded approvingly before turning to Ethan. "Senator Baldwin is eager to discuss the sustainability initiatives you presented last month. Perhaps you could spare him a few minutes?" "Of course," Ethan agreed, then glanced at Sophia. "Would you like to join us?" "I'll get something to drink and find you shortly," she responded, recognizing the business conversation didn't require her presence. As Ethan departed with his father, Sophia made her way toward the refreshment table, maintaining the composed expression that had served her through countless difficult situations. She had just accepted a glass of sparkling water when a familiar voice spoke beside her. Well, if it isn't the nurse who launched a corporate reformation, Victoria Langston stood resplendent in emerald silk that complemented her blonde perfection, her smile social, but her eyes calculating. "Miss Langston," Sophia acknowledged with professional courtesy. "Lovely to see you again, isn't it?" Victoria took a delicate sip of champagne. "I must say, you've accomplished what an army of debutantes and 2 family therapists couldn't, domesticating Ethan Hamilton. The entire room is buzzing about it." "I haven't domesticated anyone," Sophia replied evenly. "Ethan makes his own choices." Victoria's perfectly arched eyebrow rose slightly. "Such modest deflection. Tell me, What's your secret, the Florence Nightingale effect? Or perhaps just the novelty of someone utterly different from his usual milieu? Before Sophia could respond, another woman joined them, older, elegantly coiffed, with the confident bearing of established wealth. Victoria, darling, aren't you going to introduce me to Ethan's mysterious companion? Victoria's smile tightened fractionally. Of course, Aunt Eleanor. This is Sophia Bennett, Charles's private nurse. Sophia, Eleanor Whitmore, Ethan's godmother and Metropolitan Hospital board member, nodded, her assessment swift and comprehensive. Margaret Wong speaks highly of your skills, though I confess surprise at seeing you in this capacity tonight. The implication was clear: professional boundaries had been crossed, a fact Eleanor's position on the hospital board made particularly relevant to Sophia's career. My contract with Mr. Hamilton concludes next week, Sophia stated calmly. All parties are aware of and comfortable with my presence here tonight. How reassuring, Eleanor replied with practiced pleasantness, though one does wonder about the long-term viability of such unconventional connections. Ethan has always had eclectic tastes, but eventually returns to compatible circles like Victoria, the younger woman supplied with practiced modesty. We've known each other since childhood. Some bonds transcend temporary diversions. The conversational assault was masterfully executed, polite enough to avoid appearing openly hostile, yet precise in undermining Sophia's position and confidence. In hospital confrontations, Sophia would have relied on professional authority here. She had no established standing to draw upon. There you are. Ethan's voice cut through the tension as he rejoined their group, his relaxed expression transforming to alertness as he registered the dynamics at play. I see you've met my godmother, Eleanor. We were just discussing hospital board matters. Eleanor smiled. Miss Bennett's reputation in cardiac care is apparently quite impressive among many other qualities, Ethan replied, his hand finding Sophia's in a public gesture that left no ambiguity about their relationship. Victoria's smile remained fixed, though something flickered in her eyes. Ethan, darling, your father mentioned you've been spearheading the new environmental compliance initiatives, finally embracing the family legacy. Parts of it, Ethan acknowledged. The Hamilton legacy needed significant revision, inspired revision, apparently, Eleanor observed with pointed emphasis, glancing between him and Sophia. The implication hung in the air until Ethan addressed it directly. If you're wondering whether Sophia has influenced my recent decisions, the answer is unequivocally yes. She's reminded me that privilege without purpose is fundamentally empty. The straightforward acknowledgement left no room for subtle undermining. Eleanor's expression registered surprise before settling into diplomatic neutrality. How refreshing to hear such candor at these events, isn't it? Ethan agreed pleasantly. If you'll excuse us, I believe the program is about to begin. As he guided Sophia toward their table, she murmured, That was direct. I told you I'm done hiding what matters, he replied simply. Besides, Eleanor's approval of my choices expired when she encouraged my mother to seek fulfillment in Australia with her tennis instructor. Throughout dinner, Sophia navigated the complex social currents with increasing confidence. Charles, surprisingly, facilitated her integration by engaging her in conversation about hospital administration that highlighted her professional knowledge. Several tablemates, initially reserved, gradually warmed as she demonstrated intelligence and poise that defied whatever preconceptions they had harbored. Between courses, Ethan leaned close, his hand finding hers beneath the table. How are you holding up? He asked, his eyes communicating deeper concern than his casual tone suggested. Better than expected, she admitted softly. Though I'm starting to understand why you developed that practiced indifference. It's exhausting being constantly evaluated. His gentle squeeze conveyed perfect understanding. You're doing beautifully, and what matters most is what's happening here. He tapped his chest lightly. Not out there. The simple intimacy of the moment grounded Sophia amid the social complexities surrounding them. This was the reality beneath the performance. Two people connecting authentically, despite external pressures. The evening's most challenging moment arrived during the foundation director's recognition of major donors. Vivian Hamilton made her entrance halfway through the proceedings, her timing ensuring maximum attention as she claimed the empty chair at Charles's table directly opposite Sophia and Ethan. Mother, Ethan acknowledged with careful neutrality, I didn't realize you'd be attending. The Hamilton Foundation has always been a family priority, Vivian replied smoothly. I founded the educational outreach program, if you recall. Her gaze shifted to Sophia, assessing her appearance with the practiced eye of someone who recognized designer labels at 20 paces. Miss Bennett, How nice to see you engaging with the philanthropic side of the family, though I imagine these events differ significantly from hospital fundraisers. Different atmospheres, similar purpose, Sophia replied evenly. Leveraging resources to address healthcare gaps, how pragmatically expressed. Vivian smiled without warmth. Though philanthropy in our circles extends beyond mere resource allocation to tradition and social responsibility concepts, difficult to fully appreciate without proper context. Before the conversation could deteriorate further, the foundation director announced the evening's largest donation, a significant endowment from Hamilton Industries for cardiac research and treatment access for underserved communities. We're particularly pleased to announce this program was developed by our next generation of leadership, the director continued. Ethan Hamilton has championed this initiative personally, bringing fresh vision to the foundation's mission. Surprised murmurs rippled through the ballroom as Ethan rose to acknowledge the recognition. Sophia felt a surge of pride, knowing how meaningful this particular cause was not a generic charitable gesture, but a targeted program addressing gaps he had come to understand through their many conversations about healthcare inequality. I believe philanthropy requires both resources and informed perspective, Ethan stated from the podium. This initiative was inspired by healthcare professionals who navigate systemic challenges daily, particularly those serving communities with limited access to specialized cardiac care. His gaze found Sophia briefly before continuing. When we listen to voices beyond our typical circles, we discover more effective solutions. The Hamilton Foundation is committed to that broader perspective going forward. The speech was brief but significant, establishing Ethan's emerging leadership philosophy, while acknowledging influences beyond traditional Hamilton circles. Watching him articulate values they had discussed during late-night conversations, Sophia recognized the authentic evolution of someone finding their voice rather than performing an expected role. When he returned to their table, Charles nodded with uncharacteristic approval, while Vivian maintained a composed expression that didn't quite mask her surprise at her son's poised presentation. Quite the departure from your usual foundation appearances, she observed coolly. Last year, you arrived an hour late and left with the bartender, as I recall. Personal growth, mother, Ethan replied calmly. Something worth celebrating rather than measuring against past mistakes. Later, as the formal program concluded and the evening transitioned to dancing and social mingling, Ethan guided Sophia onto the floor for a waltz. His hand at her waist was respectful, yet possessive, his movements confident as he led her through steps she had hastily practiced in her apartment the previous evening. Still terrified? He asked quietly, their conversation private despite the surrounding couples. Less so, Sophia admitted, though your mother's expression suggests I failed some essential evaluation. Her approval isn't required for my happiness, Ethan replied with simple certainty, something I spent years learning. As they moved in perfect synchronization across the floor, Sophia allowed herself to acknowledge what had been developing between them, not merely attraction or circumstantial connection, but something more profound. Against all rational expectation, against backgrounds that could hardly be more different, against the subtle and overt opposition of Ethan's social circle, they had forged something authentic. What happens after next week? She asked, voicing the question that had lingered unspoken between them. When I'm no longer contractually bound to the Hamilton estate. Ethan's hand tightened slightly at her waist. That depends entirely on what you want, Sophia. I know what I hope for, but this isn't solely my decision. The simple acknowledgement of her agency, her equal voice in determining their future, confirmed what she had come to believe about the man now holding her. Beneath years of practiced indifference beat the heart of someone capable of genuine partnership. I hope, she began carefully, for the chance to discover who we are together, without professional boundaries or family complications dictating terms. His smile, private, genuine, containing a vulnerability few had ever witnessed, was answer enough for tonight. Whatever challenges awaited beyond this ballroom, they would face them together, step by careful step, building something neither had expected, but both now recognized as worth fighting for. Chapter 12. Full Circle. Metropolitan Hospital's rooftop garden had been created as a sanctuary for patients and staff, a place where healing could continue beyond sterile corridors. In late June, with summer flowers in full bloom and the city skyline creating a dramatic backdrop, it became something else, entirely. The setting for a moment Sophia Bennett had never anticipated when she first walked these halls as a dedicated young nurse. Are you sure this is where you want to do this? Dr. Wong asked, adjusting her formal suit with uncharacteristic nervousness. The Hamilton estate has those ridiculous gardens that probably cost more than our annual operating budget. This is perfect, Sophia assured her mentor. This hospital is where everything important in my life has happened. It had been 6 months since her contract at the Hamilton estate concluded. 6 months of carefully navigating the transition from professional relationship to personal one. Ethan had respected her need to re-establish her independent identity, waiting 2 weeks after her contract ended before asking her to dinner a simple meal at a neighborhood restaurant near her apartment, rather than some extravagant display of wealth. They had built their relationship deliberately, each step taken with clear-eyed awareness of the challenges their different backgrounds presented. Sophia had returned to Metropolitan Hospital, accepting Dr. Wong's offer to head the new cardiac rehabilitation program. Ethan had accelerated his transformation of Hamilton Industries, implementing sustainability initiatives that reflected his evolving values. He's changed, Clara Bennett had observed after meeting Ethan for the 3rd time, her initial skepticism giving way to cautious approval, not pretending to change, actually doing the work. Now, standing in the hospital garden where countless patients had found momentary peace, Sophia smoothed her simple cream dress and waited. The small gathering represented the core people who had shaped her journey. Vivian Hamilton had surprised them by arriving just that morning after returning to Australia following a tense month-long visit. She had maintained distance until receiving Ethan's heartfelt letter 3 weeks ago. In it, he had candidly addressed their fractured relationship while extending an olive branch. "I'm not here to judge," Vivian had told Sophia privately before the ceremony, her usual sharp edges softened. "I watched my son change these past months, in ways I didn't think possible. At first, I thought it was infatuation. Now I see it's much more." Charles, meanwhile, had surprised everyone by becoming an unexpected ally, once his initial strategic matchmaking impulses were replaced by observation of his son's genuine happiness. "Ready?" Dr. Wong asked, offering her arm. "More than ready," she replied, accepting her support as the small string quartet began playing. Ethan waited beneath a simple archway of white roses, looking nothing like the dismissive heir she had met 10 months earlier. His expression as she approached contained everything they had built together: respect, admiration, and a love that had developed not despite their differences, but through the understanding those differences had fostered. The ceremony itself was brief and personal. They had written their own vows, each promising not perfection but partnership, not blind devotion but clear-eyed commitment to growing together through whatever challenges arose. "When I first met you," Ethan said, his voice steady, "I was sleepwalking through a life of privilege, without purpose. Your unwavering integrity showed me a different path, not through criticism, but by example." When Sophia spoke, her words came from the heart rather than the careful script she had prepared. "You saw me when I was trying to be invisible behind professional competence. You challenged me to accept connection without sacrificing independence." As they exchanged rings, Sophia caught sight of her mother wiping away tears beside a surprisingly emotional Charles Hamilton. Their unlikely friendship represented everything this union symbolized: the worlds converging through mutual respect, rather than remaining separated by superficial differences. The small reception took place in Metropolitan Hospital's renovated atrium. Ethan had insisted on using Hamilton resources to benefit the hospital that had shaped Sophia, funding renovations that would serve patients and staff long after their wedding day. Later, as guests mingled, Clara approached her daughter with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Your father called," she said quietly, "saw the engagement announcement in the business section, wanted to attend, but wasn't sure he'd be welcome." The revelation might once have reopened old wounds now. Sophia found herself considering it with surprising equanimity. "Perhaps next time," she replied. "Some relationships take longer to heal." Like the Hamiltons, her mother observed wisely, "That boy's mother did a number on him, but he's working through it like someone else I know. Your dignity never required perfection, baby, just authenticity." As the evening progressed, Dr. Wong raised a toast that captured the essence of what many had witnessed. "To Sophia and Ethan, proof that healing happens in unexpected ways, and that the most effective medicine is sometimes seeing someone clearly when they've forgotten how to see themselves." 6 months later, they stood together in the newly established Hamilton Wing for Cardiovascular Access at Metropolitan Hospital, a joint project combining Ethan's business acumen with Sophia's healthcare expertise. The facility would provide specialized cardiac care to underserved populations inspired by conversations they had shared during late nights at the Hamilton estate. "Not bad for a reluctant heir and a dignified nurse," Ethan observed as they watched the first patients being admitted to the new wing. "Not bad at all," Sophia agreed, her hand resting instinctively on the subtle curve of her abdomen, a secret they had only recently confirmed and shared with their immediate family. 9 months after their wedding, Sophia gave birth to twins, a boy and girl, who embodied the union of two seemingly different worlds. As Ethan held his daughter while Sophia nursed their son, the circle that had begun with a reluctant nursing assignment felt complete. "They're perfect," Ethan whispered, his voice containing wonder that transcended privilege or position. "They're the beginning," Sophia corrected softly, "of something we're building together." In that quiet hospital room, far from the Hamilton estate's opulence, yet connected to it through the man who had transformed from entitled heir to purposeful partner, Sophia recognized the truth her mother had always tried to impart. Dignity wasn't found in isolation or self-sufficiency, but in remaining true to your values while opening yourself to connections that challenge and strengthen you. What had begun as a professional assignment had evolved into a life partnership. Neither had sought, but both now treasured proof that sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead precisely where you need to go, if you have the courage to follow them with eyes and heart open to possibilities beyond your previous understanding.